Now, welcome to another Star Wars discussion, which means forgive me if I get a bit long-winded here and there. But anyway, this time let's talk plainly about the topic of Jedi and no attachments. Let's really dig into it and ask whether it's a good or bad thing for them, why it's either a needed rule or a cruel and unnecessary one that perhaps leads to more problems than it solves. Let's then also ask if it's something Luke should keep or do away with when it comes to his new Jedi Order. Okay, so the very first thing we need to mention here, and that we should keep in mind throughout the whole discussion, is that the Force, and hence the dark side, exist in Star Wars. They are real in that galaxy, whereas they are not in our real world. Which, yeah, is obvious, and I know you know that, but it's important to keep it in mind here because the dark side is something that those with the Force can and will be influenced by. Something they can fall to and then be controlled by and end up doing horrible, horrible things, like slaughter a room full of children, for example. As Yoda said, once you start down the dark path, forever will it dominate your destiny, which doesn't literally mean you can't ever come back from the dark side. Anakin and others have done it, but it destroys who and what you once were. You become someone else, as Obi-Wan tells Luke at one point, that Anakin was destroyed and became Darth Vader. It's not just that Anakin became a bad person suddenly, he became someone and something else entirely. He became a servant of the dark side. Which is the true irony and horror of the dark side. You fall to it by being too selfish, by only caring about yourself and the things you want, by seeking things like immortality and the power to control everything and everyone and to make things the way you want them to be. But in the end, the ultimate form of selfishness becomes enslavement. It controls you instead of you controlling it, and you just become a prisoner of your own wants and desires, your own endless search for one fleeting moment of pleasure after another. And the fear of losing everything you've acquired makes you miserable, unable to trust anyone else, which leads to suffering for yourself and everyone around you. Whereas the light side is about selflessness, about doing for and giving to others. The idea being that living a life for others is more satisfying and fulfilling and brings you more joy than living only for yourself. This is the very foundation of everything the Jedi believe, that they exist to serve and keep the peace for everyone else in the galaxy. And they are willing to sacrifice whatever they must to make that happen, even having personal attachments that could otherwise sway them to not consider the bigger picture or the greater good, to start thinking and then acting selfishly instead. Which, not to get too into this topic, is what I think some people, especially in today's world, where social media tends to make some of us rather self-absorbed and constantly seeking the attention and adoration of others, I don't think they get that the Jedi willingly and happily give up attachments, that they're okay with not getting married and having children and all that other stuff. It's not just because there's this rule in place that tells them they need to forsake attachments. It's because that's their way of being, what they want to do with their life. They want to serve and give up personal desires because of the profound sense of purpose it gives them to do for others. Not to mention the sense of joy that they get from being a part of something bigger than the self, which is the opposite of the suffering the Sith feel by being so alone. The Jedi in the story of Star Wars, are meant to represent and be the very epitome of selflessness. Again, the opposite of the Sith, who are the epitome of selfishness. That is the dichotomy of Star Wars. And no, we're not supposed to take away from the story that we should all be exactly like the Jedi, that we should all give up our attachments and become something like warrior monks. Nor is the message supposed to be that if we were like them, if we lived a life completely devoted to others and serving, that we'd be, or that they are, miserable for it. No, the message of Star Wars, or one of them, is for us real people in the real world to seek balance in our lives, to try to give a little more to the world and those around us, and to take maybe a little bit less from them. Because if we all did that, if we were all even just a bit more generous, a bit more Jedi-like, you could say, our world would be a much, much better place. So no, we're not supposed to literally be like the Jedi. It's okay for us to have personal attachments, to get married, to love our family and friends, to have children and all that other stuff that comes with life, and to acquire some personal possessions along the way that we can cherish, though hopefully not too many and not too much. Hopefully we are not completely materialistic. And yes, for a lot of us, what makes life worth living are those simple joys, are our friends and family, or the few things we have, or the pursuit of them if we haven't found them yet. which the Jedi try to safeguard by keeping the galaxy free of Sith who would rob people of choice and that pursuit by trying to control everything. Simply put here, the happiness of Jedi comes in ensuring the happiness of others, which is all a part of the other fundamental difference between the two that goes along with selfless and selfish, which is that the Jedi seek to maintain freedom for all while the Sith seek to control everyone and everything. And we can see what happens when a Sith, like Palpatine or Darth Sidious, gains that control, what happens to the people of the galaxy under his rule. And above all else, the Jedi exist to stop something like that from happening, to stop the Sith or anyone or anything else from ruling over the entire galaxy. And to them, to the Jedi, preventing that and keeping the galaxy free in general is more important, much more important than what they personally might have or want, which is why, again, they are willingly going to give up attachments, why they are more than okay with it. They understand the importance of their existence and their place and purpose in the galaxy. Again, that is what gives them meaning. And to steal a line from another franchise here, with great power comes great responsibility. And this is right about the time where someone will want to make the argument that if the Jedi were taught how to love and handle personal attachments and relationships, to handle their emotions, they'd be fine or even better off for it. That responsibly handling attachments is the correct way. They'll say that if Anakin Skywalker had been allowed to marry Padme, or if he wasn't afraid to talk to the rest of the Jedi about her and his feelings towards her, none of that incident would have ever happened. And first of all here, of course, Anakin was trained to handle his emotions, as all Jedi are. That's a big part of what Jedi training is, handling your feelings and emotions and not letting them control you or dictate your actions. It's not about suppressing them and pretending they don't exist. It's about managing them and realizing that keeping calm, making rational choices, is much better than acting out of anger or fear, which is something that perhaps a seasoned Qui-Gon Jinn would have done a better job at teaching than the young, freshly knighted Obi-Wan Kenobi, but that's a discussion for another time. Anyway, being a Jedi is about letting the Force flow through you like a conduit of peace and serenity so that you can hear and follow the will of the Force, so that you can bring balance to the galaxy, so that you can maintain peace and freedom for it. Not trying to control the Force, trying to weaponize it with your rage and anger to use it only to get what you want. And so yes, of course, Anakin was trained to handle his emotions and his feelings. He wasn't trained to be a robot that never felt anything or wasn't allowed to have any friends whatsoever. But he chose to give into those deeper feelings and emotions for Padme. He chose to love and marry her. He chose to forsake the Jedi way, which leads to the question, what would have been different for him if he'd been allowed to love and marry Padme? If the Jedi were okay with attachments and he didn't have to keep it all a secret? What really changes in that scenario for him and the galaxy? And yeah, that's a difficult question to answer because there are many facets here to consider. But let's really think about it here and remove our own feelings and emotions and think about it as logically and as rationally as we possibly can. Was the fact that Anakin had to keep his relationship a secret what caused him to fall to the dark side? What caused him to pick Padme over letting Windu kill Palpatine and safeguard the galaxy from the Sith in that fateful moment from Revenge of the Sith? Now, did it perhaps contribute to some degree because he was resentful towards the Jedi at that point? Yeah, I think we can say that's the case to some degree. But that's still not what causes him to save Palpatine and pick Padme. It may have made it easier to strike out against Windu, but it was his love for Padme that made him save Palpatine, plain and simple. He even says he can't live without her afterwards, clearly stating that she is more important than anything else to him, certainly more important than being a Jedi is to him and trying to hold to their causes and their ways, which again are extremely important and needed in the galaxy where the dark side does exist and where Sith can and will conquer. And so let's return to the question, was having to keep his love and marriage to Padme a secret what really led to his fall? Or was it embracing that love, giving something to Palpatine to exploit by placing it above all else? Is that what led to his fall? Does anything and or everything really change if Anakin was allowed to marry Padme, assuming events play out in a similar fashion, which of course they may not. But even if it doesn't happen like that, like it happens in Revenge of the Sith where he has this choice to make, I think we can safely say, should a similar situation arise, one where Anakin had to pick something else over Padme, even safeguarding the whole damn galaxy, he wouldn't be able to do it. He is always going to choose Padme, whether it's a secret love or one he is allowed to have out in the open and permitted to have by the Jedi Code. I don't exactly blame him for that love. I'm not saying he's a bad person because he loves someone that much. I get that he loves her that much, and I'd pick my wife over the galaxy too. But I'm also not a Jedi. I'll never have to pick her over killing a Sith Lord, hopefully. But this is still all why the Jedi do not allow attachments in the first place. Why it is a rule and an important one. Because at least some Jedi, maybe most of them, would not be able to let someone they truly love and care about die for the greater good. They will pick that person that means more to them than everybody else in the galaxy. Though again here, a true Jedi, someone who really wants this life, would willingly forsake attachments and be happy with that way of life, as most Jedi clearly are. Otherwise, the Order would have collapsed at some point prior to Anakin. If this was something a great many struggled with no attachments, certainly the rule either would have been changed, and then it likely would have led to disaster long before this. But it hadn't been changed, nor do we know about any other great catastrophe caused by attachments. And we have to keep in mind here that the Jedi have been the guardians of peace and justice for 1,000 generations, or roughly 25,000 years according to Obi-Wan in A New Hope. And though we obviously don't know the full history of the Jedi according to George Lucas, or the full history of the Star Wars galaxy, or how he imagines the Jedi Order to be for all that time, if we keep in mind his core philosophy behind Star Wars is selfish versus selfless, and that again, the Jedi are the epitome of that ideal, the selfless ideal, I think it's pretty safe to say no attachment has been a rule for a long time in the Jedi Order, and maybe since the very beginning or early days of the Order, again, according to George Lucas. Which now brings us to Luke and his Jedi Order, and the argument many make that Luke should change or do away with this rule, that it should be changed because after 25,000 years of it apparently working, and working pretty well, and with 10,000 other Jedi in the prequel era apparently able to handle this rule and willingly handling it, that the rule should be changed because one Jedi didn't follow the rule and it led to disaster. Which, when you really stop and think about it logically, is a pretty strange argument to make, because that one failure, and a massive one at that granted, that one failure out of how many, probably millions of Jedi throughout history, should lead to change of something that has worked for 25,000 years. It's like saying, I don't know, because one car breaks down, we shouldn't use cars anymore. We should ditch the idea. Which, yeah, it's a dumb example, but hopefully you kind of get my point here, that one failure doesn't outweigh countless successes throughout a 25,000 year time span. If anything, wouldn't Anakin's story be an argument to not change the rule? Again, keeping in mind, if he'd been allowed to get married, to love and cherish Padme freely and openly, he'd almost certainly have still picked her over his Jedi duties in a similar scenario. Shouldn't the argument here, given again the successful history of the Jedi Order and its code, be that the rule wasn't flawed, that Anakin's failure to follow the rule was the problem? That if any change should be made, it should be giving more choice to the Jedi, making it easier to leave the Order should they choose another life, should they choose love, and personal love, for other people. And sure, letting trained Jedi go because they suddenly fell in love could lead to its own set of problems. And also, don't get me wrong, I think there is an interesting discussion and story around the no attachment rule in the Jedi Code. I think this is something the sequel trilogy should have explored, because yeah, Luke's love for his father does bring him back to the light, and attachments do seem to be a strength for him. Well, sort of, because, as Palpatine points out, and to play devil's advocate here, they are also weaknesses, you could argue. Because more than once, his love for his friends gets him into some serious trouble. They almost get him killed and or falling to the dark side, in fact. In The Empire Strikes Back, Luke runs off to save his friends instead of completing his training, and he ends up losing badly to Darth Vader in the process. In fact, if Vader isn't trying to capture him or turn him to the dark side himself, Luke is killed by Vader, and pretty quickly and easily here. Simply put, Luke's attachments should have gotten him killed in this instance. Because the only reason he ended up facing Vader was because of his friends, because he picked them over being a Jedi. Not all too unlike Anakin picking Padme over staying true to the Jedi way. Then in Return of the Jedi, Vader threatening to turn Leia to the dark side causes Luke to lash out, to embrace the dark side and to nearly kill his father, and then to take his place at Palpatine's side. And it wasn't love for his father that stops him from falling to the dark side. It was kind of the opposite. It was instead realizing he was becoming like him when he sees Vader's missing mechanical hand, and then looks at his own. That's actually what brings him back from the brink of the dark side. Once again, Luke's attachments were almost his undoing. And so now we come back to the question, would Luke right away with his first students do away with the no attachment rule? Would he look at his own experiences, at his own failures, all the while also weighing the fact that for 25,000 years no attachments had been the way of the Jedi and that it had worked? And would he immediately say, we should get rid of no attachments because of my father, because that way failed one Jedi? And speaking of that, what would Anakin, if he came back as a Force ghost, what would he say to his son about attachments? Would he place the blame for his failures on the Jedi or on himself? And so no, I don't think this is all something Luke would change right away. And I know some will want to bring up the expanded universe, but do keep in mind Luke's story post Return of the Jedi started years before the prequels ever came out and the no attachment rule ever became a thing known in Star Wars. Anyway, here instead I think it's something he thinks about and grapples with as time goes on, and he thinks more and more about what truly saved his father and what a Jedi should be, which again could and would, I think, make for a really interesting story, and is what the sequels should have been. And so, to get into some spoilers for the latest episode of the Book of Boba Fett, episode 6 to be exact, and I'll give you a few seconds to click away by rambling a little bit here. And I'm sorry to spring this on you should you be someone who hasn't seen this episode yet and is wondering what possible spoilers could pertain to that in this video. Though if you are someone who hasn't yet seen this episode and you haven't had it spoiled somehow by it being all over the internet, that's pretty impressive and you should really go watch it right now before you do have it spoiled. Anyway, rambling over, and last spoiler warning, Luke giving Grogu a choice in this latest episode of the Book of Boba Fett is progress for the Jedi Order. This is Luke making a change, and a big one. He's not telling Grogu to let go of all your fear of loss, like Yoda told Anakin. He's asking him what he wants out of life. He's giving him an option, not telling him to suck it up and just be a Jedi. And no, as much as some people want to see it, Grogu cannot pick both. That is failing the test. Anakin essentially picked both deep love for another and being a Jedi, and that is what led to his problems. What Luke is trying to do here, the test he's giving him, is to see if Grogu wants to actually be a Jedi or not. Can Grogu, if he is faced with an Anakin-type situation, can he pick the greater good in that scenario? It's that simple here. Luke is not forgetting everything he learned in Return of the Jedi with his father. He is very much remembering it, and he is slowly but surely making changes because of it. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. In yesterday's video, I go more into Grogu's choice and Luke, so that's why I'm cutting the discussion here when it maybe is starting to get good. Plus, this video has gone on long enough, and if you made it this far, thank you for listening to me ramble. But anyway, now it's time for you to leave your comment below and tell me what you think about any and all of this. And so leave that comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.